I have something exciting to share before we dive into this week's episode. On September 10th, I'm teaching a free live class called How to Build Trust and Safety in Yourself, even when it feels like anxiety has taken over. Here's the thing, this is the piece so many people are missing in their recovery. And honestly, it's why I struggled for so long too. I didn't know how to feel safe in my own mind and body. And without that foundation, everything else I tried felt shaky and hard. So, in this class, I'm going to show you how to actually build that trust and safety so panic and anxiety stop controlling your life. There are two times you can pick to join from, and if you can't make it live, no worries, I'll send you the replay after. To sign up, simply head to the link in the show notes or head to ahealthypush.com/trust. I can't wait to see you there. I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of A Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hello, and welcome back to A Healthy Push. So, today we're going to talk about some of the really common experiences that show up when you've been struggling with anxiety and panic disorder or agoraphobia for a while. And these are things that often go unspoken, but I promise you're not the only one who has experienced them and felt them. When I was struggling, I truly thought I was the only one who was having the experiences and was feeling the things that I was feeling. Things like grief and hopelessness and even anger. And because I really didn't hear anybody talking about any of it, I often thought there was something incredibly wrong with me. And I did a lot of that searching to figure out what was wrong with me. But the truth is, these feelings are a part of being human, and they're also just a part of the recovery journey. So, today I want to walk you through some of these experiences like comparison, grief, anger, hopelessness, shame, loneliness, and some others. And my hope is that as you listen, you'll feel seen and validated, and you'll feel a lot less alone because recovery is absolutely hard, but it is absolutely possible. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath before we dive in because I feel like a lot of this carries some weight, and I encourage you to take a breath with me. Okay, let's dive in. So, the first one, and I know this is something that shows up for a lot of people, is comparison. So, comparison can look like comparing yourself to who you used to be and what you used to be able to do. And it can also look like comparing yourself to others. And I struggled with all of it. And I know many of my students have, and I know many of you listening are struggling with this. So, let's talk about this. I remember constantly comparing myself to the quote, old me, right? To this version of me who didn't struggle with anxiety and could just hop in the car, leave the house, drive anywhere, go anywhere, and say yes to things like say yes to last minute things, say yes to bigger things without even giving it a second thought. And when I was really deep into it and comparing myself to this old version of me, I would think things like, what the fuck has happened to me? Like, why can't I just do what I used to do? Why can't I do the simplest things? Like, why With everything that I do, am I carrying so much anxiety and fear? And this is really hard because you remember all that stuff, right? You remember this version of you that could just go and do. And you weren't waking up with that anxiety and you weren't thinking about how is today going to go? How much anxiety am I going to experience? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to sit at work? Am I going to be able to drive home? Like, am I going to be able to live? And it is so hard because, of course, you know that version of you and you just want that version of you back so badly. But I wasn't just comparing myself to this old version of myself, I was also comparing myself to anyone and everyone else. Like sometimes I would just watch family or friends or even random people like walking down the street or in their car, and I would watch them doing things seemingly so effortlessly and think, why can't I just be normal? Like, I can't tell you how many times I sat in my car, like on my way to work or on public transportation, and I would think, how can everyone else do this and be totally fine? Like, why am I here freaking out just sitting in my car? And this is such a hard place to be in, right? Especially when you're doing a lot of work to heal and you're like, I'm just not getting there. Like, I'm still struggling and I just want that old person back, or I just want to be like everyone else. Like, I want to be able to do things without freaking out and without overly thinking about everything. But here's the thing, right? Comparison leaves us feeling less than, right? It often convinces us you're so not capable. You are so far from normal. You can't do anything. You are just always going to struggle. And it's kind of silly because often when we're doing this comparison game, we're comparing ourselves to people who aren't even struggling with anxiety and panic. And we're comparing ourselves to this old version of ourselves who wasn't struggling with anxiety and panic. So, of course, things look differently, and it is incredibly frustrating. And I know it's so easy to go down that comparison hole, but it really never leads anywhere good, right? It just feels so awful. It causes us to beat ourselves up and lose any motivation, and it chips away at our self confidence. Like it's so harmful. So when you catch yourself doing this, right, just bring awareness to it. Bring awareness to the fact that you are comparing and try to be gentle with yourself. Really try to meet yourself where you're at and honor where you're at. And it's okay that things are incredibly hard. And of course, you want to be back to that, quote, old version of yourself. And of course, you want to walk around and do things without carrying all the anxiety and panic and fear. And you will. So this one ties nicely into the next one, which is grief. And this is one I see pop up in so many of my clients and students. Anxiety and grief are often deeply intertwined because anxiety often means there are missed experiences, there are changed plans, there's lost time, there's just life not looking how you thought and hoped it would look. And there is a lot to grieve, even if we don't recognize it at first. Thinking back in my journey, I remember the stuff that I said no to. I remember a lot of the trips, the events, the simple moments that I missed because anxiety and panic was absolutely running the show. And I remember the things that I would have done differently if I hadn't been trapped by fear. And at the time, I didn't even realize what I was feeling. I just thought, I'm weak, I'm broken, and there's something terribly wrong with me. But a lot of what I was experiencing was actually grief. Like I was grieving the life I felt like anxiety had stolen from me. And this is one of the most common things I hear from students in my Panic to Peace program. Most of us don't even realize that grief is a part of the picture. And we rarely give ourselves permission to acknowledge it, never mind process it. But grief is so real and it deserves and it needs attention. And it can absolutely come in waves. A lot of people experience it in waves and they can be pretty intense, like experiencing sadness and a longing and frustration and even envy, right, of what others living the life we wish we could have. I think this is oftentimes too why we do that comparison because we look at other people and we just envy and we're feeling so much grief, but we're not actually letting ourselves acknowledge and process that grief. And grief doesn't sit quietly, right? Like it shows up in some big ways. I know for me, it showed up as anger and sometimes hopelessness and sometimes just deep exhaustion. Grief is often layered under all the other emotions we experience with anxiety. And when it goes unrecognized, it can make things feel so freaking heavy. And when we don't fully acknowledge our sadness or the losses anxiety has brought us, it really starts to simmer under the surface and it's got to come out. It's just like anxiety, right? It often comes out and it often comes out in the way of anger. And so this is the next one that I want to talk about. Ugh, the anger. There were so many times that I was furious with my mind and my body and just my experiences and my circumstances. Like, I would sometimes just think, why is my mind and heart racing, right? When I'm just literally standing in the grocery store. And I would get so angry at myself just in general. Like, why can't I get over this already? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I just be like everyone else? And I think it's really important to say and to acknowledge that anger is a very normal response. It's actually a protective response. When you're hurting or you're feeling like things are unfair, your brain and body are trying to defend you. But anger can also feel confusing because most of us, like anxiety, weren't taught how to process it. So instead, when we feel it, we turn inward. We beat ourselves up, we criticize ourselves, we feel guilty for even feeling angry, or we just kind of let the anger consume us and it comes out in really not fun and kind of awful ways. I know for myself, it came out a lot around the people that I really cared about and loved most. And I often sort of took that, all of my experiences and that anger and sort of took that out on them, which was incredibly unfair. But it was like at times it consumed me because I wasn't processing it and I honestly didn't know how to process it. So here's the truth with anger it is often pointing us towards something deeper, much deeper. It's saying, hey, there's some pain here that hasn't been acknowledged. There's some stuff here that you need to acknowledge. And when you see anger through that lens, it really becomes less about it being like a bad or negative emotion and just more about being human and an emotion and experience like anxiety that makes so much sense. Like the anger makes so much sense. Anxiety is hard and it often does feel really freaking unfair. And it often is really unfair. And this anger often hangs out with another really heavy emotion, which is hopelessness, which is the next thing I want to talk about. You know, when you've been struggling with anxiety and panic for a while, hopelessness creeps in, of course. And with it, I remember thinking, maybe this is just who I am now. Like, honestly, maybe I'll just always be the girl who panics at the thought of leaving the house and doing things and saying yes and going to appointments and going to work and the girl who plans her whole life around avoiding anxiety. I honestly couldn't even imagine a future where things were different. The fears felt so strong and so permanent that I became convinced I would always have them. Like, I think this is not talked about enough either. Like, the intense fears that you carry and have been carrying for so long, they really do feel like they're never going away. They're just sort of way too ingrained and and permanent and that they're always going to be there. I can assure you this is so far from the truth, but I just want to validate that experience because it is such a common experience. And with this hopelessness, like I want to validate this too. It wasn't just this low level worry. Like it was a deep, heavy feeling of giving up. Like some days I genuinely felt like it wasn't even worth trying anymore. And I mean, I've been recovered for 8 years now, and I'm sure you can still hear the emotion in my voice. that hopelessness can be so convincing because it whispers things that feel like truth. Like, you'll never get better. This is just who you are. Nothing will ever change. It doesn't matter what you do. This is just a part of who you are. And this is such a hard place to be in, right? To really feel it, not just to think it, but really feel it and be convinced of it. And I remember my mom telling me, and she was my best supporter, like my best friend. And she knew what it was like to struggle with anxiety and panic and agoraphobia. And I remember her saying to me so many times, Shannon, you're going to get better. You're going to heal. Things aren't always going to look like this. You are going to get better. And I just remember that anger popping up and this feeling of hopelessness. And it was like, no, I'm not. Like, you don't get it. This is different. I'm different. I am not your typical, right? Like, this is so bad. And so that hopelessness is so heavy and it's so deep. And the trickiness with hopelessness is it often arrives after a long buildup of a lot of these other emotions like anger, grief, shame, fear. And it's exhausting to fight it because your mind and body have been running on overdrive for so long. But here's the truth, it's a feeling, this hopelessness, it's not a fact. And even when you can't see it, even when you felt it more times than you can count, there is the possibility of change, even amongst that feeling of hopelessness. And when hopelessness is paired with anger, shame, or grief, it's actually your brain signaling something important. Something needs to change, and you need support. And recognizing this is really the first step toward hope, even if it feels small. When you're in this hopeless place, it's so easy to slip into shame and guilt. So, these are the next things that I want to talk about, shame and guilt. And these are big things that I see in people who come into my Panic to Peace program. They are carrying so much shame and guilt, and they have been for so long. Like, I'm talking years, a decade, or more. And I understand this. I get it. I carried so much shame for so long and about everything, like about the things I avoided, about the way I thought people saw me. I had so much shame about the excuses that I made for why I couldn't go places and do things. And all because I didn't want people to know the truth. Like, I didn't want people to know how bad it was. And there was so much guilt with this shame, like so much guilt that my anxiety was impacting every aspect of my life, and especially the people that I loved. Like, I felt so guilty that I wasn't showing up in the way that I wanted to, and guilty that I couldn't just handle it like everyone else. And I just felt like such a burden to everyone and even to myself. I think that's often not talked about enough either. Like, I felt like such a burden to everyone, but it was heaviest to carry for myself. I know so many people are carrying around so many layers of shame. Shame about avoidance, and shame about how their anxiety shows up, and shame about the things they feel they, quote, should be able to do, and just shame about not being perfect. And it's exhausting because shame is another one that doesn't just sit quietly. Like, it says things like, you're broken, you're not enough. People will judge you if they see the truth. And shame thrives in silence. The more you hide it, the louder it gets. And that hiding often leads to isolation and pulling away from people and avoiding situations and pretending everything is fine. But the truth is, shame is a signal that you've been carrying too much alone, and that you need and deserve connection, understanding, and compassion. So many of our emotions are just signals, and they're not signals of bad things like you're weak, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. It's just like, no, these emotions are trying to tell you this is too much and you need support, and you need to be more compassionate with yourself and more curious and understanding, and all these things that are going to be so much more helpful. So, I want to talk more about this isolation and loneliness, because isolation and loneliness often grows out of this unspoken shame and so much freaking guilt. So, isolation and loneliness. When you're carrying shame, it's natural to want to hide it. This is kind of all of our humans' normal response to shame. But when you hide it, isolation starts to creep in, right? You might feel like nobody could possibly understand what I'm going through. I am not going to share it. I'm not going to let anyone see it. There's no point. I know I felt this way. Like friends, family, coworkers, they were living in a completely different world. They would have no idea. They wouldn't even be able to understand a piece of what it was that I was struggling with. And even with my mom, who was my biggest and like best supporter, there was stuff I didn't even tell her because I had so much shame surrounding it. All of this can feel incredibly lonely, right? And so hard when you're navigating intense fear and panic, and you really just believe nobody could truly get it. And often, instead of showing our struggle, we put on another face entirely. We act like everything is fine. We pretend to be fine, and we even laugh and have a seemingly good time when we're panicking inside. We say yes when we're absolutely terrified out of our minds. And we present this version of ourselves that doesn't seem to struggle at all. And it's exhausting. Like hiding the truth can feel necessary for acceptance or safety, but it also reinforces the cycle of loneliness. You feel unseen and no one can support you because they don't know the full picture. I remember so many times where I stayed home and I canceled plans and I pretended everything was fine, all while feeling completely alone inside. And that's a really common experience for people living with anxiety, panic disorder, or agoraphobia. And when this isolation lingers and it starts to get worse, it comes with another layer, which is this exhaustion and burnout. Living with anxiety is exhausting, right? And I'm sure you're nodding your head. Exhaustion and burnout are almost inevitable when you've been living with anxiety for a long time. I really want you to think about it. Like your nervous system has been on high alert for quite some time, and maybe it's still on that high alert. Like you're bracing for anxiety and panic attacks, and you're replaying those what if scenarios. You're planning escape routes, and you're managing avoidance strategies, all while trying to show up for your life. And your mind and your body are in fight or flight mode so often that it feels like they just can't get a break. I remember feeling completely drained at the end of every day. And not even at the end. Sometimes it was literally as soon as I woke up, like I'm already freaking exhausted. And I felt this way even when I hadn't really done anything like physical. My brain was just exhausted from doing all the constant hypervigilance, and my body was so tense from stress, and my emotions felt so heavy from everything that I was suppressing, the fear, the shame, the anger, the list goes on, right? And it's a cumulative weight that can feel impossible to shake. And this burnout comes when this constant stress starts to take a toll on every part of your life. Like tasks start to feel harder, even simple, easy tasks, like your motivation really starts to fade. You don't want to do anything, never mind doing exposure work. And even the things you used to enjoy can feel really overwhelming and really don't even carry any joy anymore. You're like, I don't want to do anything because nothing is bringing me joy or happiness. And when exhaustion is this heavy, it makes the next layer, this fear of the future, feel even scarier because it's so hard to imagine moving forward and living this different life, maybe getting back to that quote old version of you when you're running on empty. So I want to talk about this fear of the future. When you're exhausted and you're burnt out from managing anxiety all the time, this fear of the future can feel so overwhelming. And it's not just general worry, right? It's that deep, knot in your stomach dread of what's coming next. Like, I used to get invited to do things, or I just had things that I needed to do. And I would immediately think, what if I go and I freak out? What if I panic? What if I can't get home? What if something goes wrong and I can't handle it? And this was like my day to day, this constant fear of what's next. And it went way deeper than this. Like, it jumped to that future of like, am I ever going to be able to do the things that I want to do in life? Because I could barely get through everyday tasks, never mind thinking about the stuff that I wanted to do in the future, that I wanted my life to consist of, like traveling and having a successful career or maybe having a child. Like the future felt impossible and completely out of reach, which made it hard to imagine that life could ever feel normal or happy again. This fear of the future often feels so heavy because it's tied to everything else that you've been carrying. All this stuff that I've talked about, the anger, grief, shame, exhaustion, all of it. And it convinces you like the next time I feel anxious, the next time I panic, the next setback, like all of that is just waiting around the corner and I'm just going to get worse. And sometimes it makes it hard to even imagine a future where things could be different, right? Or like that is not anywhere within my reach. And you kind of like honestly write some of this stuff off. You convince yourself, I'm never going to do this stuff. And this fear of the future really makes you second guess yourself constantly. Like, can I handle this? Will I be stuck in this anxiety forever? Am I ever going to get better? Am I actually recovering? Like, is this actually doing anything? And all of this fear feeds the self doubt, making progress feel fragile or really fleeting. But interestingly, sometimes, even in the middle of that self doubt, you can also feel some flickers of hope. So, I want to talk about self doubt and these flickers of hope. And this is the last one that I want to talk about. So, after carrying all these really heavy emotions, comparison, grief, anger, hopelessness, shame, isolation, exhaustion, and fear of the future, it's very common to feel self doubt. I remember thinking so often, like, maybe I'm just too far gone. Maybe I'll never be able to do this. Maybe this is anxiety is just who I am now. And those thoughts can be really convincing, especially when everything else feels so overwhelming. Self doubt can make it hard to even take small steps forward because you start questioning your strength, your progress, your capability, your worth. Like you're questioning everything. And yet, even in the middle of that self doubt, sometimes there are these little flickers of hope, these tiny moments that show you maybe you can handle more than you think. Maybe you are making more progress than you think. Maybe you are actually doing this. Maybe this stuff is actually possible for you. For me, sometimes it was just those small wins of like getting through a drive that I didn't think that I could get through, or riding out a panic attack without pulling over, turning around and hightailing it home, or just facing a situation I had avoided for a long time. Those moments didn't erase the struggle, but they definitely helped to remind me I am capable, change is possible, and maybe I can heal. Like maybe I can get better. I want to emphasize this here. Like, hope doesn't have to feel big to matter or to have an impact. Even a tiny flicker of hope is enough to remind your brain and your body that recovery is possible. And recognizing these flickers is a powerful tool for moving through the self doubt and the fear and the exhaustion. So, even when it feels like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, those small moments are proof that it is there and that you're already moving toward it. So, if you've ever felt comparison, grief, anger, all of these things that I've talked about, I want you to really hear me. You are not failing, you are not broken. These are normal parts of the journey. I felt all of these things too. And so many of my students come to me and they're like, dang, I thought I was the only one. And there are so many people in this group. There are so many people that are sharing my same thoughts and experiences and my fears. I want you to know healing is absolutely possible, even when you can't see it. You can build trust and safety in yourself, and you can create a life that feels so much bigger than anxiety. And you will. So, this is the part where I give you a little healthy push and some encouragement. Even if you're feeling all of these things. Or maybe you're just feeling a few of these things, but it feels so freaking heavy. And you're like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I want you to check out my new free live class that I'm teaching on September 10th. It's all about how to build trust and safety in yourself, even when it feels like anxiety is taken over. Building that trust and safety is such a big foundation of healing. So I want you to check out that class. The link will be in the show notes. But I also want to encourage you, if you've been somebody who has been looking at my Panic to Peace program and you're like, I don't know, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's been years for you. And this is something I hear all the time. Shannon, I have been on your waiting list several times and I haven't joined. And I finally did. And I'm so glad that I did. Like, I wish I had done this sooner. So if you are somebody who is in that spot, you've been like eyeing it, you've been thinking about it, I really just want you to listen to yourself. If that little voice within you is saying, hey, you should try this, I really want to see you inside of my Panic to Peace program this round. So the doors will open September 10th, the same day as my free live class. And doors will stay open for, I think, 11 or 12 days, and that's it. And this is the last time I'm teaching this program for a while, at least until 2026. So the link for Panic to Peace will be in the show notes as well. And if you're on my wait list, you get first access to the program and you get a really special discount. If this episode has resonated with you, I would love it if you would share it with someone who you think might need to hear it. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to a Healthy Push podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And I want you to hear me. You are doing so much better than you think. And I'm over here cheering you on every freaking step of the way. So keep taking healthy action. I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.